I believe it's from New York City. This one. Hello, everyone. It is 4:31 p.m. Wednesday, May 14th, 2025. Mark Kulak, KWACZ. Funny Polish name. I got it from my stepdad. I'm not Polish, but I am American. And this is where the pot melts. This is where the pots go to melt. Not that a melted pot isn't necessarily any better, but this is America. I was actually born Mark Nichols, N-I-C-H-O-L-L-S, which is double L, which is, I believe, Scott or Cornwall. Cornwall is one of England that has a lot. They typically would spell it that way. Not that. I don't know. Who the heck knows where these people came from that wound up in my family tree? I titled this one, this is going to be part of the 280 series, Andrew Wakefield and Peter Daszak. Daszak. You can also say it Daszak. D-A-S-Z-A-K. Of EcoHealth. They both play into September 11th. Boy, is that a big statement. The company I keep. Some important words. Won't let me ever be rejected. Illusion of consensus, maybe, was what Helmet was singing about. It's called. So I'm calling this one Andrew Wakefield, Peter Daszak of EcoHealth. So with the COVID-19 pandemic, as Jonathan Cooey showed in Giga Home Biological today in his show, very early on, everyone was so certain that there was a lab leak, which started a chain of events which led to this global pandemic. And that's why the virus is real and you need to take it seriously. And boy, oh boy, I must confess, I bought into that. I totally bought into it. I might have even fueled that fire a little bit. I don't know. But I totally bought into that for at least a year and a half. Even now, there's still lots of talk about, it was a real pandemic. It was caused by a virus, a gain-of-function virus that came out of laboratory, and Peter Daszak and EcoHealth, and then there's this Ralph Barrick scientist, and whatever the case, okay. Peter Daszak is someone that most people don't know about. I certainly never heard the name. It's kind of funny, these little 6-letter Polish names keep popping up between Peter Strzok, Peter Daszak, and I'm a Mark Kulak. So we got the funny 6-letter Polish names with Z's and K's in them. It's kind of funny that we all have a Z and all of a K, and it's all 6 letters. But I don't know. I just think it's a funny coincidence. So Peter Daszak became one of the big bad guys. And like I just said, I bought into that narrative. I probably helped fuel it, certainly. I think other people came online just to take a little bit of the fire that I was bringing to the game. Suddenly, there were Peter Daszak and EcoHealth Alliance experts all over the place after I started doing some shows, which got a lot of views, actually. And then my views started to go down as people went to those other channels that just had better production, I guess. So Peter Daszak, even right now, he's still being called out as the bad guy, one of the bad guys responsible for this COVID-19, at least on one side of the political spectrum, at least as it's been arranged, okay? And then the other side that still believes in pandemics, naturally, mostly, many of those people still see Peter Daszak's a good guy, just trying to find the next big pandemic and stop it. Or next big potential pandemic, let's put it that way, and then stop it before it really happens. He's looking out for humanity. He's looking out for our kids. He's looking out for etc. And, of course, he's protecting Mother Earth in the process. Andrew Wakefield, on the other hand, is a bad guy. And it's interesting because Peter Daszak is the ultimate bad guy on one side of the political aisle and a good guy on the other side of the political aisle. Meanwhile, it's just the opposite with Andrew Wakefield. Andrew Wakefield is the ultimate bad guy, because he just wants kids to die, as many of them as possible, depriving them of vaccines. He's a crazy man. He's doing it all because he wants to make money, or he's doing it all because he's a bad guy and he wants kids to die. He just says horrible things. They're all wrong about childhood vaccines. Meanwhile, the other side, the side that thinks Peter Daszak is bad, has to think, well, Andrew Wakefield, boy, he lost his license. Nobody has given more for us and for the future than Andrew Wakefield. He's put it all on the line. For 30 years, he has been speaking out. Another way of thinking about it is that, wow, for 30 years, nothing has been accomplished. For 30 years, he hasn't moved the needle at all. As a matter of fact, if you do the math based upon our current birth rates, etc., the youngest 60 million Americans have all been subjected or could have been subjected to the childhood vaccine schedule since Andrew Wakefield lost his license or, was called out in the UK. And Andrew Wakefield, of course, is heralded as one of the visionaries and heroes by RFK Jr.'s group, Children's Health Defense. Meanwhile, Children's Health Defense also writes books about the Wuhan virus and lab leaks, and Peter Daszak is bad. It's amazing how pivotal these two people are. And what no one wants to say is that they co-authored together twice, meaning they were both on the same grant paperwork. And it wasn't for some unrelated issue. It was regarding the measles virus. And the MMR vaccine is the big thing that Andrew Wakefield is all about. And they both are from the UK. And they both came to the United States shortly afterwards. Peter Daszak came to the United States in 1998, 1999, after being heralded as a highly capable potential, pathologist by none other than Vice President Al Gore of the United States of America and a London newspaper. How's that for visibility? And when Peter Daszak came to the United States with his wife immediately gets a job in the United States CDC. I still can't find much information about her. A lot of her profiles are locked down. This is all before September 11th, by the way. This is 1999, of course. And Peter Daszak winds up in U.S. newspapers, getting all kinds of visibility as finding, Ebola and so on. And he's starting to work with some of the Bronx Zoo people and William Koresh, things that go on to become the predecessors for EcoHealth. Now, Andrew Wakefield didn't move to the United States until just after September 11, 2001. But Andrew Wakefield came to the United States in the year 2000 for something that's really unprecedented, for a United States Senate hearing. Andrew Wakefield came to the United States in the year 2000 Senate hearing regarding childhood vaccinations. In particular, all this controversy about this MMR. Now, I don't know why the United States had to bring in this British guy to talk about this. And then they brought in another British guy. And then, of course, you could see how the Senate was being split, right? Some people were kooks to think that vaccines could ever be bad. Then there's some people who said, look, my kids are ruined. They were fine, and then after these vaccines, at least one of the vaccines, they're struggling. Their everyday life is a struggle right now. Wakefield, of course, during those hearings says, well, I'm not anti-vaccine. I want kids to be protected with vaccine. Interesting words. He says things like, I just want vaccines to be safe. Totally. So in other words, believing in viruses, believing in the capability of vaccines, and wanting vaccines. He just wants something changed. There's something he thinks amiss, something wrong, something that doesn't quite line up, a safety profile, something with the MMR vaccine. These things at first don't seem to be related. And if someone says, okay, so what? They co-authored papers together. Mark Kulak, haven't you said in the past that you've worked with people that you don't even know anymore? 100% true. 100% true. I have worked with people that I may not even recognize if I saw them in person, much less know their name anymore. I've sat in meetings. I've probably had people who reported to me who I wouldn't even recognize anymore. I mean, vaguely, maybe I'd be like, that person looks a little familiar, but I wouldn't even be able to identify. Were they a neighbor? Did I know them from college, high school? Did I work with them? I mean, I wouldn't know. So the fact that, there were two papers of one, I think, had 4 people, one had 5 people, or it was 5 and 6, and they shared a grant and they were on the paper together. It doesn't mean immediately, okay, that they are closest of buds. And I'm not sure that they really are the closest of buds, but there definitely were colleagues working at different places, but on the same grant, same paper, same subject. And it was related to measles, and that combined work of Wakefield and Daszak was used as input into that MMR study, which became so controversial. It's not like it just went off to the pasture somewhere, never to be looked at again. It was used as an input into this highly controversial paper. No one seems to notice that. And they were both from the UK. All right, well, a lot of people in the UK. And they both came to the United States not too far from each other, within like 18 months or so. Well, it's odd. But again, this doesn't mean that there's some grand collusion going on, at least with just that data. But keep in mind how odd it is that 20-something years later, one becomes the hero on one side and the villain on the other side. And the second person is just the opposite, the villain on one side and the hero on the other side. Now, I don't remember everyone I worked with 25 years ago, okay? But if it just so happened that if I was in a position where I was and let's just say this was organic, okay? Because their rises in visibility is not organic. But let's just say, imagine it was, where I was considered to be a hero on one side and a demon on the other side of the political aisle. If the other side of the political aisle had an old friend of mine from 25 years ago who I co-authored with twice and had shared grants with, and that other person is just the opposite, demonized to the people who like me and beloved by the people who hate me, I would know that. And as a matter of fact, I would probably go, wow, guys, this is remarkable that this other person who used to be in my orbit, I collaborated with, just happens to also be a person of significance. I would say, it's just once, right? Again, it doesn't necessarily mean if everything was just organic that there was collusion, but I wouldn't be able to help myself other than to say, this is incredible. I used to work with that guy. I shared grants. I had sushi with him. Him and his wife, we went out we double dated a couple of times, We went bowling, went to the movies. As a matter of fact, they have a kid around the same age as one of my kids. When my kid had an age 3 birthday party, we invited their kid or something like that. Really, what's the harm in saying it? It's just so remarkable. I wouldn't be able to help myself but to say it. But today, Andrew Wakefield and Peter Daszak are just kind of walking along as if they've never mentioned this. Now, they don't have to mention it, but it's just strange that they haven't mentioned it. So what's happening now is there's a series of coincidences that are piling up, okay? And coincidences and correlation is not causation. That's true. But it's a lot of correlation. At some point, there's a lot of correlation. But none of these things are necessarily suggest causality. It could truly just be coincidence. So while I have been noting that it is incredibly odd that Wakefield and Daszak have this shared track and all of these coincidences, I've always stopped short of saying it's causal. And you could look at my old videos. I've been saying it's really odd because usually with this much correlation, eventually something's going to fall out that's causal. But I haven't really found it yet. But what really did it is the book Germs. That's right. The book Germs did it. This book it's just bombshell after bombshell after bombshell. This book is the atom bomb. I don't believe in nuclear weapons, by the way. But this book is the atom bomb of tying together September 11th and COVID-19. If you give it a little bit of, if you take the time to dig into all the things it doesn't say, if you assess all the things that have been omitted from the Amazon Audible audiobook, if you go through all the archives that I have, you're going to eventually, it's all going to make sense. So how can I make this assessment that Wakefield and Daszak, there is not just correlation and coincidence, there's actual causality here. What it is by looking at this book, it highlights United States Senate hearings, important hearings. And then you're going to realize that those hearings connect these two people. It starts off by talking about a United States senator, U.S. senator, not a local state senator, but a U.S. senator, Christopher Shays, from the state of Connecticut, my home state, really the main state of the Houstonic River. And this is back in 1998, and it goes on for a couple of years. So Christopher Shays, a Republican, a former Peace Corps volunteer and New England moderate. He used his post as a chairman in the Senate of a House subcommittee to hold hearings that pounded the Pentagon for its handling of the Gulf War syndrome. So there were many troops that were identified or self-identified as being very sick after the Gulf War. I haven't assessed the issue deeply. No doubt it got a lot of visibility. Until I dig into it on my own, I'm hesitant to characterize it beyond the fact that it was visible and there were a lot of different opinions on it. So Christopher Shays, or Senator Shays, had a good sense of how to turn complicated issues into public dramas. His Gulf War hearings, and again, this would have been like 1992 to 1995, had pitted ailing veterans against officials from the Pentagon and the Veterans Administration. He assigned a longtime aide, Larry Halloran, to investigate the case of an Air National Guardsman from Connecticut who had quit the reserves rather than be immunized. So in other words, there was a guardsman who said, I'm not going to take your orders to get vaccinated. And military officials claimed that the resignation was an isolated incident, but Halloran found 8 pilots from his state alone, the state of Connecticut, who had left the Guard over the issue. His suspicions aroused. This is Christopher Shays, Senator Shays, and then he asked the General Accounting Office to investigate the program. And he also filed a request with the Pentagon for every scrap piece of paper in its files on the anthrax debate. So you can see that Senator Shays has a position that Pentagon here is being dirty. They're asking people to take these vaccines, and these vaccines could be causing harm. Now, if that's all you know about the story, good for Christopher Shays. If we have military personnel that are being impacted, negatively harmed by any medical countermeasure, especially if it's unnecessary, it damn well better be published. We better have visibility onto it. But the absence of something bad is not necessarily goodness, okay? There's other sides to these stories. Now, the committee chairman to whom Shays reported, so I guess the chairman of the committee, was a Representative Dan Burton of Indiana, Burton. Now, Dan Burton, I believe Republican, was one of President Clinton's most visceral opponents. A darling of the conservative movement and leader of the impeachment drive, Dan Burton never missed a chance to embarrass the Democrats. He was also a persistent critic of childhood vaccines, questioning whether scientists were overlooking the long-term side effects. Burton was delighted to have Shays' subcommittee examine the Pentagon's anthrax vaccine program. Okay, so let's consider this right now. So it's 1998, 1999. The Gulf War syndrome hearings have happened already. Senator Burton of Indiana, Burton, is a critic of childhood vaccines. Also note that this book does something very interesting. In another chapter, it actually says that the anthrax vaccine was said to be safer, or I should say have less injuries than childhood vaccines. The book actually made a statement, and it didn't go out of its way to say it was wrong, that childhood vaccines cause harm. You hear what I'm saying? This Germs book. Now, it doesn't say that every kid is getting damaged from childhood vaccines, but the book Germs does not go out of its way to say that vaccine injury is a myth. The book Germs does not go out of its way to say childhood vaccine injuries are a myth. It is open to the possibility, and it's also very open to the possibility. It almost promotes the possibility that vaccine injuries from the old anthrax vaccine are real. You see where this is going? Well, you're going to see it soon, if you haven't already. So Senator Burton, in 98 and 99, is now working with this Senator Shays from Connecticut, and now they're having hearings where military personnel are coming up and in front of the United States of America in Senate hearings are saying that they said no to the vaccine, the military was pressuring them, Pentagon bad. And other people are going to say, we're going to come up and they're going to give them credibility and say, yeah, there's a lot of injuries from those old anthrax vaccines, and they're shutting down the factory and they're finding bugs, and there's this greedy Lebanese, German guy, Fraud El Hebri, who just bought the company, and you can't trust anything that's going on. The Pentagon also comes up in those hearings and says, look, the safety profile of these things is very sound, and the troops are going to need the anthrax vaccine. The old anthrax vaccine is proven, and yeah, we're having a hard time making it fast enough, but we figure we can work that out. Meanwhile, and I'm going to open up C-SPAN, and we're going to look at the videos, okay? Dan Burton also, as this says, he's a critic of childhood vaccines. He's questioning them. So when, as in the title, Andrew Wakefield is called upon from the UK to fly to the United States and to help Americans sort out this nonsense about the MMR vaccine. Tell us, Wakefield, what you were suggesting in this amazing paper of yours that calls into question the safety of the MMR vaccine. It was Dan Burton who called Wakefield in. So the same subcommittee chairman is in one hand calling in Andrew Wakefield and letting more and more Americans hear that, childhood vaccines might be problematic. They might be causing autism. They're not tested properly enough. Maybe we need to test the thing separately. Maybe it's the adjuvants. Maybe it's the thimerosal. All this diarrhea. That doubt is coming from Wakefield and Burton. Meanwhile, Burton, then with Shays in another set of subcommittee hearings, is also throwing shade on the old anthrax vaccine. In particular, the old anthrax vaccine. Okay, what's the first thing you can conclude from this? Well, one is it sounds like Dan Burton spends a lot of time thinking about vaccines. And Dan Burton says in one of the hearings that the one regarding the childhood vaccines, that he has a grandchild who has autism or something like that. I don't know how specific it was. And when you initially watch it, he seems pretty emotional, and I have no reason to question him, I guess. And it sort of ends inconclusive, though. But it does end with energy that maybe some childhood vaccines are causing some problems. And maybe it's the adjuvants, or maybe they're not tested right, or maybe it's something else. Who knows? The doubt train has left the station, and it's starting to gain momentum. The doubt about the safety of childhood vaccines has left the station, and it's gaining momentum going into September 11th, 2001. I should say the fall of 2001 and into 2002. Now, why is that connected with September 11th? Well, September 11th appears to be one of the biggest crimes in U.S. history, and done possibly by some people with a rationale of trying to avoid the U.S. military being subjected to anything but the old anthrax vaccine. Because as this book says, this book also does not stop people from questioning the safety of childhood vaccines. And this Germs book also lays down the possibility that there could be safer second-generation anthrax vaccines, such as a DNA vaccine out there. The book says it. So I guess if this old anthrax vaccine is bad and it's run by corrupt Muslim, Lebanese, German guys, and it's all about the money, and there's Zionists involved, and they're finding bugs in there, and there's adjuvant problems, and they can't make it fast enough. Problem. Well, fortunately, there's DNA vaccines, and it solves every problem. And it's basically presented like that. Now, maybe it does. But if you have a car, if your car, the brakes are going on it and the roof is leaking, and you got a garbage bag for one of the windows that's taped, duct taped on, and your tires keep losing pressure, and you got dead mice in your vents, and it's a horrible color, and all these problems, right? It's burning oil. It didn't pass inspection. Terrible. But if someone says, look, you can solve that by having another random car, Why should the other random car with no information other than it's not your car be preferred? I mean, that random car could be something in a junkyard with a tree growing out of it. You don't know. All you know is that that the DNA vaccine is not the old vaccine. That's all they know. And it's just assumed that it's going to solve all the problems. And by the way, the DNA vaccines also happens to be precisely what the Human Genome Project want. It's exactly, precisely what Craig Venter wants, who's prominent in this book regarding his role in the Human Genome Project, in this book about the possibility of a biological terror attack at a major U.S. metropolitan center. Germs, released September 7th or 9th of 2001, written by Judith Miller. Let's hypothesize. Let's play out the possibility, okay, or an alternative future where there was a huge bioterror attack, crop dusters, probably autopiloted. Why would you actually need people to fly planes and then crash them into the building and blow up? Why do you need that if you have autopilot? The reason why they have all this evidence of hijackers being at clubs is because they wanted people to know that there were hijackers here having fun. And they're going to be photos of the hijackers, you know, with young American women who have been forced into stripping for a living so that Americans will be as mad as possible at the hijackers. And let's just say that happens. Thousands of people die in the crowd. Many more get injured. And then there's a big emergency. And guess what? They can't make the old anthrax vaccine fast enough. The DNA vaccines are then approved. Emergency use authorized. The FDA has no alternative. The FDA can't get in the way. And then they're used on the military. And it's successful. Yahoo! The era of DNA vaccines is here. And maybe the era of DNA vaccines is now here as of mid or late 2002. Maybe that's what was going to happen. Let's say that did happen. If that did happen, then Andrew Wakefield is already on the train of getting America to realize childhood vaccines are a problem because of the way they were made. In fact, they are risky in causing problems for the same reason the old anthrax vaccine is causing problems. Look at all these children that are getting this autism, SIDS, etc. Matter of fact, we can, for the sake of the children, because we love the kids so much, we can convert the childhood vaccine schedule to DNA vaccines, and they will be safe. No more adjuvants, no more contamination, no more cold storage requirements. You can even personalize it based upon your DNA or your condition. And we can use this on the kids because it worked for the troops. Make sure you don't stop waving that flag. You're a God-loving American. You know how much good the DNA vaccine did for our troops. God bless America. And that is how Andrew Wakefield was part of the plan to be part of creating the momentum, getting the train to leave the station and go faster and faster and get America ready for children to have their childhood vaccine schedule swapped over to DNA vaccines. And it was going to happen because the DNA vaccines were going to rescue the U.S. military. That is why Andrew Wakefield was being promoted. They didn't expect what happened on September 11th. The whole plan to get to the new era of vaccines was halted. Anthony Fauci, his whole 20 years with NIAID and HIV was supposed to end with a DNA vaccine for HIV. AIDS was going to be cured with a DNA vaccine, as this book that was published the week after September 11th tells you, which also includes many references indirectly to Robert Malone. HIV was going to be cured. DNA vaccine. DNA vaccine worked on the military. That old anthrax vaccine is garbage. And then Tony Fauci was going to retire. There was never a plan for Tony Fauci to be in the same role for 40-something years. But they needed him in the same role because of the failure to get the DNA vaccines out there, starting in late 2001 or early 2002. On the afternoon of September 11th, Anthony Fauci was probably in a meeting where they said, Tony, I got some bad news. You're going to need to be around for another 20 years until we try something else. Next time it's going to be a pandemic. Because they knew you can't do this bioterrorism thing over and over again. They knew it would only work once. And then after that, there were going to be so many changes that the possibility of pulling something like that off again was not going to really exist. They probably weren't going to try it again. But they said, Anthony, sorry, Tony, but you are already privy to so much confidential information that you have to stay in the NIAID job for another 20 years. I'm sure people like Robert Malone were pulled in and like, Robert, your wife Jill, look, you guys you're still relatively young. You're only 41 years old. You know what we were going to do with 9/11, or I should say in 2001. You know about the DNA vaccines. We need you to help us over the next 20-something years get to the big pandemic, which is then going to flip the switch to get us over to gene therapy vaccines. And they probably said, okay. And then they went to Meryl Nass and said, Meryl, look, you know a lot about what's been happening. You know that you were part of trying to protect the military against the bad old anthrax vaccines. You know what the score was. We need you to hang on for another 20 years. You're going to play another role with the big pandemic. And she probably said, okay. They told Andrew Wakefield, at Wakefield, I know that you probably thought within the first 5 years, by 2003 or 4, the United States was going to flip over the childhood DNA vaccines. You're going to have to hang on for another 20 years. Good news, we put some MK Ultra on Elle Macpherson, you know, the swimsuit model, and she's willing to date you. I can guarantee it for 8 years. So we're going to help the time. We're going to help the time fly by. Divorce that wife of yours, the mother of your 4 children. Just get rid of her. Upgrade. You're going to get Elle Macpherson. We're going to give you a mansion in Florida. It's going to be good times. Dinner parties, and then we're going to revive your role between 2020 and 2025. Please do us a favor. Don't put on any weight. Try to stay, kind of cool looking as long as possible. And I'm sure they told Tony Fauci the same thing. Fauci, I know you're running every day. You're going to need to stay slim and fit. We need you for 20 or 25 more years. This is why Wakefield is still on stage. Wakefield's job was never to save the kids against intramuscular injection and vaccines in general. It was to provide enough of a reason to question the old vaccines in general. And maybe the new DNA vaccines would have cured all the problems that Andrew Wakefield found. Now, Peter Daszak is an interesting story because he was brought to the United States a couple years before 9/11, okay? And Peter Daszak's story is a little bit different than Wakefield's, okay? A little bit, in the sense that they knew that after September 11th, 2001, the next 20 years was going to be about emerging diseases. That was already part of the plan, I believe. They were going to flip the switch after September 11th. It was going to be SARS. It was going to be Ebola. It was going to be mosquito diseases, et cetera, et cetera. And then eventually there was going to be the pandemic to end all pandemics. It was going to be the Spanish flu all over again. And Peter Daszak, he was actually signing up for 20 years of being active in planting the seeds of worrying about viruses from bats. With all of his nonprofits, working with the people of EcoHealth, etc. I still don't know what Peter Daszak's wife does. But, so Peter Daszak wasn't necessarily a prominent person in how would you say, what was going to immediately happen with 9/11, or I should say the bioterror attack, okay? But probably with a little bit more of a delay. With all of these new and emerging diseases, that's where Peter Daszak was going to play a role. Because you can't just say we need to be worried about pertussis and mumps and measles and whooping cough and, whatever the traditional diseases are, okay, that kids get vaccinated against. there needs to be emerging diseases, changing diseases, new viruses to justify having a constantly changing input, a demand for more vaccines, changing vaccines, and customized vaccines. And that justification was going to come from all of the emerging diseases around the world. That was going to come from the fear of all of the zoonotic events. I don't think Peter Daszak's role, at least initially, was envisioned as, well, someday you're going to be part of a lab leak story. I suspect he would not have been down with that. I don't know. I'm just suggesting, okay? I don't really know for sure. But nonetheless, that's the role he wound up playing. So Andrew Wakefield and Peter Daszak, the fact that they are both still visible, and I don't mean like remotely visible. Wakefield is considered to be a god. He is a god. All of these fake Christians that are part of this MAGA Maha movement, at least as far as the leadership goes, okay? They are fake Christians. I hope they become real Christians. I would love that, but at the moment, I believe many of them are fake Christians. And they worship Andrew Wakefield more than they do Christ. And that's kind of messed up. That just should not be the case. So he is extremely visible. And Peter Daszak, there are people who are willing to risk their life to get revenge on Peter Daszak. So these people are extremely visible. And the fact that no one, even in just this is an interesting kind of way, will call out the fact that there is this this constant, bumping into each other and mirroring of their careers. No one will even mention it. I mean, isn't it just interesting from wow, that's kind of crazy, I mean, if you heard a story like, hey, did you know, I don't know, Michael Jackson once went to the same, I don't know, band camp that Sean Connery went to? I mean, I don't know, they're not even really of the same era as far as when they were born. But let's just say, there's some crazy story like that, right? It doesn't mean anything. But, there's all those fun facts, right? Like, this actor was born in the same town that this football player was born in. People love talking about this type of stuff. The fact that Wakefield and Daszak are that close initially has never been brought up by anybody other than Jonathan Cooey of Giga Home Biological. And I don't think it's just a coincidence. I think it's causal. Either Wakefield suggested Daszak, which I think is actually possible. I suspect that after Wakefield's paper, Wakefield was already being spoken to probably by U.S. intelligence. Maybe by Dan Burton as early as 1997, 1998. They probably said, okay, Andrew Wakefield, Wakey, you seem to know what you're doing. You seem to have some good contacts. Is there anyone that you know of that might be helpful in us being able to orchestrate this next 20-25-year plan? And Wakey might have gone, there's this Peter Daszak dude. I've worked with him. He's not exactly the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I kind of like him. He's kind of funny, We went to a hot dog eating contest once together, and we had a barrel of laughs. I don't know, something like that. One of them recommended the other one, and they both came to the United States. I'm at this point, I'm pretty sure they probably sent each other Christmas cards. I'm pretty sure of it. And no one has mentioned it. even just, you know what? Even just say, wow, Jonathan Cooey and Mark Kulak mentioned this Wakefield and Peter Daszak connection. Boy, that's it's interesting, but that's garbage. That doesn't mean anything. They won't even call it out as meaningless. And I suspect because it is not just a coincidence. It is a relationship with consequences. It is a relationship with that is impactful. It is a relationship that will help understand the connections, the history, the trajectory, which started many decades ago, which led up to COVID-19, and finally an excuse to get over this stupid FDA thing and to get genetic vaccines into people's arms. Finally, after 50, 70 years of work, finally. This was supposed to happen back after the big bioterror event. But that didn't happen. So, I would encourage the audience, keep thinking about this. Keep talking about it. Keep chatting it. Every time someone says, oh, Peter Daszak, EcoHealth, they need to go travel. What about their work with Andrew Wakefield and well-documented long-term history? And you can see, okay, a collusion of sorts just through these hearings. Oh, what I wanted to show you was if we go to C-SPAN here. Whoops, I got so many things on my desk right now. I actually just have books falling off. C-SPAN. Wakefield. So Andrew Wakefield, April. No, that's not the one. Okay, give me a second here. On April 6th, 2000, Andrew Wakefield is in Congress talking about autism and childhood vaccines. Witnesses testified a theory about a routine vaccinations may cause autism in a growing number of children. Parents spoke out, so they bring parents there, etc. And people in this video include, well, Scott Bono. That's interesting because Scott Bono's wife is the founder, is considered to be the founder of CHD, Laura Bono. Matter of fact, Laura Bono is credited with being a big reason why RFK Jr. got involved in Children's Health Defense. There's a Colleen Boyle, Edward Cook, Kenneth Curtis. Paul Offit is there. Paul Offit and his long running, fake battle with Mary Holland. Can you see it? Mary Holland, the organization that loves Wakefield but hates Peter Daszak. And Andrew Wakefield, Henry Waxman, hosting organization. So there's definitely some video missing here because I know I'm very certain that Senator Burton kicks this one off. So you have Senator Burton on April 6, 2000 with Wakefield, U.S. Senate. The train is leaving the station on getting people on board with the possibility that maybe these childhood vaccines are causing problems. Maybe it's the adjuvants. Who knows? Maybe they need to be tested safer. Maybe someday in the future, near future, there's going to be a way of making safer vaccines. Maybe they're even going to be DNA vaccines. Now, also, if we look at Dan Burton, Dan Burton is there's way too many videos of him. So let's look at the anthrax vaccine. August 25th, 2002, here's Stephen Hatfill. Again, he was one of the first big suspects. I'm actually having a hard time finding it right now. I know I've actually played it before, and I actually want to record it yet a second time. But it was either in 1999 or 2000. It was the same Dan Burton with Christopher Shays. So, one U.S. senator and one is part of two hearings, both creating vaccine doubt. And one of them involves Wakefield, and the other one involves the anthrax vaccine, with suggestions that there's a new era of an anthrax vaccine around the corner. And it's a no-brainer that if there's going to be a new era of vaccines accepted, it's going to be a DNA vaccine accepted by the military after a large-scale biological terror attack in a major U.S. metropolitan center leaves America, but with no choice but to go that route. And it's going to work. People are going to feel great. God bless America. And then Wakefield will come in again. Oh, looks like we're having more emerging diseases now. And it looks like maybe some of these MMR vaccines really are causing problems. Let's give DNA vaccines a shot with kids. They're going to try the DNA vaccines on kids. No more autism. Everything's good. Let's change the whole schedule over. Andrew Wakefield, Peter Daszak, both gifts from the UK, are both part of a long-term plan to get all of Americans further and further down the path of using gene therapy vaccines and completing the vision of converting citizens of the world, persons of the world, into unknowing, unwitting animals being used for the purposes of medical experimentation and furthering knowledge of the mechanics of life in the human genome. And no one else, other than, God bless, Jonathan Cooey, GigaHome Biological, will say it. So that's my afternoon show for today, everyone. I finished that one under an hour. I'll clean this one up and repost. That's my show for today. Thank you. Take care. God bless.